Okay? Can you hear me?
There, that's better.
All right. Matthew chapter 22, verses 15 through 22.
Right.
It's not going to be deaf. The Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So he sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, Whose head is this, and whose title? They answered, The emperor's. Then he said to them, Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away.
Thank you, Tom. Exit stage right.
Oh, I love that.
So, why don't we go counterclockwise and see what leaped out at us in this wonderfully audible reading.
Very audible. You're not that loud compared to me.
So, Barbara, what would you say? What leaped out at you?
Nothing.
Cass? Okay. Bill?
Amy Coney Barrett.
Oh,
Boy!
okay.
The hearings trying to trap her.
Huh?
The hearings are trying
Yeah, which is what happened here. Yeah, I see your point. I do. I get
All right. Very pithy. Good.
Yeah.
Sandy?
If you give to God, God is to get, and obey the government. So we need to that knowledge. And again, it was a great teaching of it. I'm not going to trust him. Not going to trust him.
Tina, could you hear Sandy?
it.
Tina? Did you hear Sandy?
Wow. Okay, Tina. What I had said is we cannot trap Jesus, so therefore they can keep trying, but they're not going to trap him. And what we need to do is to give to God what is to go to God and to the government or to the people what we give to them. But we serve God first.
Can you hear me okay? She can't even hear me. Why can't you? Maybe why she's up.
The Wi-Fi is on.
There is sound level.
Can you hear me now?
You need to develop captioning.
Oh,
Closed captioning.
closed captioning. Right.
Is it Zoom? Zoom has closed captioning. It's at the bottom.
We want to make sure we're accessible.
Where's
We're
the...
having accessibility.
So closed captioning is right here. Assign someone to type. Oh no, I will type. Use a third party
Oh, it's not automatic.
CC server.
Right.
All right.
I'm going to ask us to all use our outdoor voice.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, so Sandy was just saying basically give to God the things that are God's and give to the people, the government, the things that they should get, right? And you can't trap Jesus. Yeah. So moving around, Sandy. Sorry. What, Sandy? Sip of coffee.
I guess I'm next.
Kathy.
I think that's what's the most impressive is how he responds. It's just very impressive because again, they were trying to trap him. And I guess that's what it means. It's a short passage.
But pretty impressive.
But pretty impressive. You're just not going to trap me.
Don't you wish we could be like Jesus?
I know, very direct. I
Yeah.
like the. This is it. This is the
Zing. It's like zing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely a zinger. So, moment, that's all I
All
got.
right. Kathy is very impressed with how direct and pointed Jesus is. All right. Lori.
Well, I just wanted to see the Pharisees and so simply. I mean, wouldn't you think of it? They come up and they start fawning on him and saying, "Oh, just tell us who is him." And it's like, "Oh my God!"
That would be a clue right there,
Yeah.
right?
And then I thought, "Oh my God, it's the separation of church and state."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, you're right.
It really is separation.
Yeah.
But it's not exclusionary.
no,
It's one of those classic both ands.
Yeah.
One does not negate or cancel out the other one. So it is both and. Give to God, give to your government or whatever is required of you. So it's the world and heaven together. You know, it's not.
But
They're
why-
not distinct. They're not distinct realms. They're side by side.
it flies in the face when it's the
Well, maybe, but what I was struck by is that, of course, elsewhere we hear that you bring the first fruits of the harvest, you bring turtle doves or a lamb, you give material things in this context at that time at the temple.
Yeah.
But his asking for the coin, which the Romans minted and introduced, which has the head of the emperor on it.
And
It's
says Son
basically
of
saying
God
if
on
you're taking their and using their money, you have to pay them the tax, right?
Right.
But he's not saying you don't support the temple, because he's not saying don't when you come to the temple. Remember, they had that whole thing with the money changers, which he overturned, right? Because the people who came to the temple had to convert what they could bring with them into acceptable offerings for the temple. So they were selling all these sacrificial animals and other stuff, right, in the forecourt. So it's interesting to me that it's a reminder to us, we often take the things that the government does for us for sort of granted, right? I mean, they print the bills, they mint the money,
Yeah.
and then we say, oh, but I don't really want to pay for that, right? I want to keep all my money. But wait a second, who made that money? In this case, the emperor made the money, or was made at his command. So, but I don't think I think Thomas Susan's right, it's both and.
I'd also like to add a little bit of exegesis to this. So, as I recall, and I want to double check this, but I'm pretty sure Jesus is in the temple when they approach him. And they're not supposed to have Roman coinage
Right.
in the temple. And so the fact that they pull out a Roman coin in the temple when they're not supposed to have Roman coins in the temple is telling
Right.
Jesus a whole lot right there, too. It's like, okay, what they're saying with their curled lips and forked tongues, Jesus can see right through it by their actions. So that's what occurred to me. It's like, yeah, so yeah, when he says, you hypocrites, he's got it darn right. Okay,
Oh, now
We're
she's-
coming-
Took me a while. I'm not aware.
we're coming back around to
Okay, so the specific here is paying a tax. I think the general thing is obey the laws of the country.
Yeah.
So yesterday there was a group of protesters in Augusta that were protesting the mask mandate. And Dr. Shah, when he did his press briefing yesterday, he commended them for wearing masks, even though they were protesting the mandate. He said they did the right thing, they obeyed the law of the land. They were wearing masks, and he commended them for that. So that's one issue, is obey the laws of the country, and unless it's some weird thing that you should do. But then the other part of this is give to God blunt, but and the way Christians legalize that, in my opinion, the tithe is 10%. You need to give 10% of your income. Although with Episcopalians, I think it's 2 or 3%, something like that. But anyway,
I
there's
mean, in
this,
reality, yes.
you know, we that, and I'm kind of an antinomian. I'm on the grace side. You know, I'm always falling on the grace and gospel side. But so the point is, if you legalize that, it can interfere with your worship, your ability to learn, to hear the gospel, everything. As an example, the church I used to go to, the rector said, and I don't remember whether these were people that stopped going to church or whether they were people in the community that were interested, but there was this obstacle, and the obstacle was they didn't have any money to contribute. They couldn't put in any options plate. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Don't worry about that. Give us the gift of your presence."
Yeah. There's a reason they say time, time, talent, and treasure.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and I also think, A, you're right. The previous chapter says he's in the temple, and he starts this strand. But B, I think what you give God, however material it may be, is love. You love God back. And so when you're giving to the church, or you're giving charitably, or you're giving to another person, it's not about the material gift, it's about your expression of love.
Absolutely.
That's the spirit, right?
Right.
Whereas when you pay a tax, you're paying a prescribed amount that's imposed on you, right? And
Yeah.
it is an obligation
Obligation.
imposed on you,
Yeah.
but you're,
Yeah.
I mean, most of us don't impose obligations from the outside we don't rejoice in, we fulfill them. We fulfill
Exactly.
the obligations, but so I think the tension here is between fulfilling our obligations, which is legalistic
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
required, whether it's the government or anything else. I mean, our obligations to our parents,
Right.
and then the spirit in which you can give to God what is God's, and God's love.
Right.
So give God love.
Right.
you know?
So backing up to last week's reading and being thrown out for not wearing the right robe, and I said the garment is love. And I wrote down, and I always do this to my little inserts. You can't read them after I've made notes all over. I have arrows and lines and everything. I wrote when it said Jesus aware of their malice, and I circled that and said the robe not to wear, the malice. So it boils back to our intention. And you said something that caught my attention because you mentioned, first fruits. And if everything we do begins with God and then it flows from there, then we're going to do the right things to give tangible expressions of our inner self, and just like the sacraments and Eucharist. And so it's all gonna flow through us and out from us because it all comes from God. But if it's not coming from God, then it's this.
Well, and there's a really interesting note here, which is that the silver denarius not only had the inscription of the emperor, but that the emperor was divine.
Right. It's this.
So he's
the
saying,
emperor is the
give
son
that
of
coin
God.
back. Who's on this? Oh, it's the emperor, and it says he's divine. So give it back. Pay the tax with that.
Yeah.
Don't keep that, because if you're keeping it, if you're amassing a fortune in coins that say Augustus Caesar is the
son of
is
God.
the son of God, you're not loving God. You're loving Augustus Caesar. It's an interesting note here. That's
Like-
what the denarius said on it.
By keeping the coin.
Yeah, and trading in the coin and all the rest. I mean, that's
Like-
why the Jewish authorities didn't allow the coins into the temple. Is what the note is saying. I mean, it's saying that you had to trade the Roman coins before you went into the temple. So I think Alma Susan is onto something by saying that one of the Herodians or one of the Pharisees produces this coin and they're in the temple. So right away he said,
Yeah.
because the rule is he's not supposed to have the image of an alternative god in God's temple.
Right, no false gods.
No false gods. Remind me next time not to bring coins in. No, none of our coins say that anyone's God. Right.
Yeah,
In
trust-
God we trust.
Trust is not divine.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all look at the headlines, but I did see that there was somebody, wasn't it on Facebook? Did you comment on a Facebook? There was an article, maybe it was the New York Times. I skim too many things late at night and early in the morning. But there was a gold coin being produced.
Oh, yes.
And it said, "In Don we trust." And to me, that is reaching a line. You know, I'm sorry. It's like, no, that is, Don is not God.
Sarah Huckabee's fantasy.
So, but there's an interesting question here I want to bring up, and this is kind of an interesting Bible. It's called Quest, the only Q&A study Bible. Answers thousands of your questions about the Bible. So,
Oh,
She's gone.
she's gone. Is it 9:30 already?
She had an appointment.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But hopefully, yeah, I was like, yep, she's got to go. Okay. Here's the question. There's several. Is disobedience to the governing authorities ever justified? In a sinful world where tyrants sometimes gain control and government officials become corrupt. Sometimes? Okay. There may be times, sorry, when believers must disobey governing authorities because they must answer to Jesus as their highest authority. However, we should obey the laws of the land whenever possible. So, the question is, when is it right to disobey authority, or is disobedience ever justified? Oh, we're losing everybody. Tina's leaving. Tom's walking away.
They hung up on me.
Oh, so
So call
that's the
again.
question. Why don't we go clockwise this time?
It is, the government is supposed to be the voice of the people collectively and for the benefit of the people. When it starts attacking and destroying the people, it needs to go. And Jesus and God are the only highest authorities. I mean, they're simply, our government is supposed to be a democracy, supposedly, a democracy that, you know, talks about the collective of the people. And if they're hurting people, that's why, to me, giving money to the church is not for room and board, et cetera, et cetera. It's more of what charities can we endorse? What charities can we put more money into? What can we say as collective people, can we do more? And we can together instead of singularly. So, okay, that's my thought.
So your answer is yes, there are times when it is okay, and the Bible guides us perhaps in that. I didn't hear you specifically say that, but
Yeah, and yes,
I just don't want to put words in your mouth.
okay.
Kathy,
I have a very difficult time right now to respect our current leader. I don't even refer to him as the president. I just refer to him as his last name. I guess it's my little way of not obeying authority. Whereas in past, no matter who was, it didn't matter what party, that didn't bother me at all. The person in that office was the president, and I respected that person as a leader. But because I feel the person in that office today is not respectful of the community, of the nation, only a certain portion of the nation, which I don't believe is fair, and has disrespected our laws, our constitution. So therefore, he's not filling that office correctly. Against my Christian values. So that's the other thing. It's like the person that's sitting in the office is against my values that I was brought up in. which was Roman Catholic, and even though I've chosen a different path today, it's still against my values. It's just I can't abide by that.
So
if he
if
was
I'm
to
hearing
walk
you
in-
right,
Yeah.
like it said here, Jesus as your highest authority
Yeah.
supersedes the person in the office
Right
currently.
currently.
But I don't see you disobeying.
Well, if he was to walk into I don't know, an office that I was in, I wouldn't walk across the room to speak to him. Whereas before,
But that's not disobeying. That's
Well,
that's exercising your freedom.
if he was to knock at my door, I would not let him in.
That's still not disobeying.
Well, to me, it's my way of
Disrespect.
fucking
Disrespect.
authority, I guess.
Disrespect, right? So
I guess I'm
But people-
Kathy, you're really a crazy wild rebel.
She is. You have
People-
never heard this woman.
It's
people,
not how I normally
you can
Yes, it is.
you can respect the dignity of
the
every
office.
human being.
Yes.
You can respect their dignity. You can say
Okay.
this is a child of God. Everybody,
I'm having a hard time
right.
with that.
and some are, some need a little more guidance from God than others. But you
I mean, I pay my
there's
bills.
a distinction between disrespecting a person who hasn't earned respect
Okay.
and not honoring their dignity. There's a
You
distinction.
can honor the office.
Well,
And
that's
that's
why I'm
right.
saying I honor the office, but not the person who happens
Exactly.
to occupy the office at this moment.
So when you've heard me pray, like for the prayers for healing,
Yes.
I specifically referred to the president.
Yes.
I keep my personal views out of it because I feel like as a pastor, I need to be pastoring all people in the congregation, whatever their position is. It's like walking a tightrope, which is why I love being Anglican, because that's what that means. Walking the tightrope,
Well,
the middle way.
I mean, I like when he got sick. All right. Prayers for healing. I mean, I can go there.
Yeah,
But when you're talking about what he does officially,
right.
I just can't.
Do you
That's-
remember? Bambi? One of my favorite movies is Bambi.
Yeah.
Really dating myself here now.
Okay.
And remember when Thumper says, "If you can't see," my mama always says, "If you can't see something nice about someone, don't say anything
I
at all."
know. So
That has, I mean, I really try to think that, like, okay, I won't engage in disparaging people.
Yeah.
I used to a lot more before I
Yeah.
became a pastor. But now I try to think about how I can impact others negatively, and I don't, it's intention impact. So I try to be a little more careful about that.
yes.
So anyway, sorry, great
anyway, that's okay.
discussion.
That's okay.
It's a great discussion. So do you need me to repeat the question?
No. I'll go back to give to God what is God's and give to Romans what Caesar what is Caesar's. I will go back to that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I was too involved. My family was, I went down to Washington because my in-laws were in Washington and I lived a lot of it and I kind of know what goes on the inside.
Okay.
And so I'll bypass.
I see. Okay.
Okay. So you're going to tread lightly. Okay.
Yeah,
Bill?
Not having the role of an official character. I definitely will protest and discourage self-centered, egotistical, unloving, hateful people who try to foment hate and division.
Yeah.
And I will not respect the person, the individual, wherever his divinity is. It is well hidden. In the end, he'll know that he's been wrong. But now,
I'm
That's
with
not
him.
disobeying a law. The question is, would you disobey the law
well,
under certain
during
circumstances?
the Vietnam era, I have an arrest record for disobeying the law.
Oh my God, he's a felon.
What's that?
You're a felon. That's it.
No, it was a misdemeanor.
Oh.
But But again, so like when you're ordained, one of the things a priest who's going to be ordained has to vow is to uphold their bishop. They, they have to, basically be obedient. They have to be obedient to their bishop. And during the prior to that, when you go through all your psych evals and everything, they check that you do all these psychological tests to see if you're fit for ministry. And some of the questions that I remember seeing was, are you one of those people that have like blind allegiance? Do you just, obey no matter what? Or so it was like, will you obey your bishop? Yes, no, whatever. And honestly, I was a little nervous that I was, because I said, well, if my bishop is doing something and I cannot abide by it, if I feel like there is a higher law written in my heart and the bishop is doing something bad or evil, no, I won't. I will resist authority. And so I thought, I've really shot myself in the foot now. But yeah, so, and I think about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, The Cost of Discipleship, and what he was attempting to do to stop Hitler. So
we should let Barbara and Brendan, because I'm going to explode in a minute.
Okay, I'm sorry. So,
but we should let Barbara go first.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to commandeer. So, Barbara.
So the question is, would I disobey the law in certain circumstances, or
Yes.
are there any circumstances in which I would disobey the
Yeah.
law? Well, ironically, my favorite color is yellow, and that seems to fit today. There are numerous passages that sort of praise shrewdness. And so, for example, the law became, it was illegal to go to church or something, or you can't, I would worship in secret, or I invite a few people over to my house.
Yeah.
Even then you could
I
be
think
arrested.
there are ways around most things. As far as martyrdom, I don't see any sense to it. So if said, do you believe in the Trinitarian God? If you say, yes, I'm going to chop your head off, I would deny it, because I don't think it's shrewd or prudent or useful or helpful to anybody concerned. Am I going to stand on integrity and leave him, without a caretaker? So yes, there are circumstances in which I would disobey the law covertly, but not overtly.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I know that's not a popular answer.
No, Jesus was pretty subversive. I think you're onto something.
Yeah.
Okay. So are you good? We're going to move on to the volcano over here.
Well, we worship at St. Andrews. St. Andrews was crucified for refusing to obey authority.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a friggin' break. All the martyrs and saints, one after another, are supposed to worship the emperor in the old days before Constantine, reject Jesus, and they refused.
Yeah.
And so when you're asked to deny your faith, deny a loving God, and embrace some other unloving God, you say no.
Yeah.
And you die. Okay, we believe in the resurrection, don't we? How important is this life? I understand you have a special role, but it seems to me unchristian to say that you absolutely obey human authority when Jesus died on the cross and all the saints and martyrs died on the cross, and we venerate them supposedly.
Yeah,
we have the Saltaire. I mean, so supposedly Andrew asked to be crucified on the Saltaire because he didn't want to presume for the same cross that Jesus had, right?
Right.
So they turned it on the side. That's probably just a myth. They probably just were lazy and created an X. But I mean, we see that in the banner.
Mm-hmm.
It's right there. He defied authority, so he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a hard time with anyone who says we have to go along. I've always had that problem with the Friends. and with some other groups that are very temperate.
Mhm.
Because it seems to me there are times when you can't be temperate anymore.
Yeah.
And sadly for the Friends, many of the early Friends in the 17th century were killed because they wouldn't accept the king's authority in religion,
Yeah.
right? That's why William Penn created Pennsylvania, so they could escape to Pennsylvania, right?
Right.
So even when you try to go along, you can still be killed.
Yes. Yep.
Anyway, that's the volcano exploding. I mean, listen, I'm the child of missionaries, the grandchild of missionaries. That, you know, I've members of my family who died in the faith overseas because they weren't supposed to be missionaries converting people, and it's just very hard for me. And yes, my parents I went along to demonstrations as a child with my parents, as a teenager, in college, because my parents, came back to the United States. There was an awful lot they didn't agree with here, having had to lost everything to the communists in China. So anyway, that's the explosion. Sorry, I apologize.
Well, I do think that traveling to China for that seminary trip was very eye-opening. I mean, very, very brief, but very eye-opening and impactful, because we heard stories from people firsthand. This was, by the way, not a converting trip. It was a relational development building trip with other Christian entities there. And, like, for instance, there are things that they're subversive. Okay. They do have underground church. China made it a one, like, no denominations. They limit, it's just, you're either Christian and, or you're not.
Actually, there are two, the Christian and Catholic.
Catholic, yes. I was going to get to that, but yes, you beat me to it. So, but for some weird reason, they don't consider Catholics Christians, which I find really bizarre. So we would go to some of these churches that had Anglican tradition in them. St. John's was one that we went to. It was really neat.
In Shanghai?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that, so you went into the church to worship, and there's the liturgical colors of the season up. They can't say they're Anglican, but it's Anglican. We're following the Ordo for Anglican worship liturgy. There's the symbolism is, the colors are there. Everything you would know that you were in an Anglican service, even if it didn't say Anglican on it. So I found it great that we have a way to still serve and worship as our hearts call us to do it, regardless of the authority trying to say otherwise. Yeah. And then, of course, there's cultural Christians, and we have plenty of that over here too, which means basically you just do it because it helps your status or helps you politically gain. So,
well, there's a big controversy in the Catholic Church right now because the Pope has negotiated a treaty with the Chinese government, and the reason why the Catholics are considered a different religion in China is because the early communists felt that they worshipped the Pope. That was their confusion. They didn't understand. But the challenge now is that so many of the churches in China are not legal. They're house churches, they're groups worshiping, because any church has to be registered with the authorities. Yep. And has to conform to the state regulations about worship. And even among Protestant Christians, majority are not. And they can all be arrested and occasionally are swept up and put in prison. And I did have the great good fortune of taking my parents back twice. And, it's an unforgettable. You've had this experience, but I mean, with my parents' old friends, colleagues, students,
the ones who had spent 25, 30 years in camp. My dad spent 1 year, okay, before the U.S. negotiated his release, but they spent 30 years in prison for being Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I think we sometimes forget in this country, until recently maybe, how much how comfortable we are,
Right.
and how easy it is to be good in this country. And in other countries, expressing love and being good can be very dangerous, very dangerous.
Yeah, you're right. We are very lucky.
And it's not, and you're absolutely right. There are plenty of, the Chinese government does an awful lot to other religions, often much worse than what they
Yeah.
do to Christians.
Yeah.
Muslims,
Yeah.
you know, just look at what they're doing in Xinjiang and Tibetan Buddhists, you know, I mean, so it's really all about power, because the
It
Chinese
is.
Communist Party has always wanted, like the Roman emperors, to be the only authority, right?
Yeah.
And any other group that meets. I mean, my father was a college professor and the vice president of a university, and he planned to stay. It never occurred to him that he was a threat to anybody. So he sent my mother and my sister and brothers away as the communists were in the north part of the city, and he stayed. And for that, he paid a huge price, because he discovered very quickly that he was an alternative authority figure and therefore had to be humiliated and punished.
Oh,
Yeah.
boy.
You know?
Yeah, it is. It's always about who's got the power, who wants to keep the power, who wants to take away the power. It's always about power. And Jesus showed us, you know, it's about, you know, giving up that worldly power for, you know, being of God, basically. And God's power is that that's one of my favorite words is kenosis, or kenotic self-emptying. That's a hard concept for us humans, giving up our power.
And death is hard.
Yeah.
I mean, none of us, I think, approaches death or dying easily. I mean, whether it's when we think about it for ourselves or when we go through it with people we love, it's very hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've told this story before when my sister called me up and said she had 6 weeks to live, and I drove over. I was in tears. I mean, I drove like a maniac and got there in 20 minutes, go running into the kitchen, and she turns to me and she's very surprised. And she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is such terrible news." And she said, "Tom, you believe in the resurrection." And I was like, and so luckily I did have the presence of mind to say, "Yes, but I won't see you for a long time." That's what I answered her.
Yeah.
But you know, her faith is a hell of a lot stronger than mine. I'll just tell you that right now. If I was told I had 6 weeks to live, I would not have the presence of mind my sister had.
Mm. Yeah. So
Are we going to do round two?
yeah, and now it's just anybody. You know, let's just forget the rounds. Just if you want to say something, just like, you know, let us know.
Okay, I think that there are so many cases that aren't black and white, and like the Vietnam War that you're talking about, it was important enough for you to go to jail for. But I remember those years, and there were plenty of conservative Christians, whole churches, that thought you sinful hippies were in the wrong. You know, so and I'm thinking, all of a sudden we're so black and white on everything, and it was just a few weeks ago that we, in this very group, we discussed being open and willing to listen to diverse opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden we're not. Well, obviously there's a right and a wrong, and to do the right thing you have to be willing to sacrifice your life. Have we lost it already? We still have to be open to other people's points of view, because we all know what it says, we differ as to what it means, and each one of us has a slightly different interpretation. And as to the general principle of obeying the law, I think right now in these days, there are two recent examples, and one is the vaccine issue that people voted on, and it passed, but there were people that voted no that would say that their religion didn't want them to take vaccines, and vaccines are harmful, and this and that. And so I think even if you disagree, you have to respect their point of view and allow them to have their point of view. And then mask wearing, I have a friend who's a Seventh-day Adventist. If you ever meet one, run. Don't invite them in for coffee. Don't ever become friends with a Seventh-day Adventist, because it's very difficult. So it was interesting to me. She was telling me that in her church, which I think in the summer they can get up to 150 people, but fewer in the winter. So I'm guessing they have close to 100 people. So they have, she said, half the people refuse to wear masks, and she's an anti-mask wearer. She works at Walmart, and she cheats by wearing this thin little piece of material that you can see light through it. So she's cheating. And I said, that thing's not keeping your droplets off of me. And then she'll go into, masks are bad and they're harmful and they'll make you sick and they're trapping all these germs close to your, and she's very adamant about that. So in her church, the people that wear masks sit in the sanctuary, and the people that refuse sit in the fellowship hall, and the two rooms are connected and they have speakers and everything.
Okay.
And I said, what about the CDC? Well, I don't believe the CDC. The CDC's wrong. And I said, well, don't you have a pastor in charge? If your pastor says everybody's supposed to wear a mask, it's against my religion to wear a mask, and so I'm not going to do it. So that's kind of two examples that come into play in contemporary circumstances.
And I think that's a good point to make when somebody says it's against my religion. I mean, we're not all these other religions. We're Christians, and we try to understand what Jesus is telling us in the Gospels. So if Jesus is always about protecting the most vulnerable, which he is clearly in the Gospels, and if he's trying to heal people and make them well, then my interpretation is that masks protect the most vulnerable, and we have experts who say that they protect the people. And so that's my position. If I have to take a position on things, I do. And I will claim my authority, and I will say, I'm sorry, but if you don't wear a mask, you're not allowed in here. I get burned up on a regular basis because I go in somewhere and the mask is, particularly in food establishments or places, like if I have to go buy some food or something, and the mask isn't even, obviously it's not being worn, or it'll say masks required on the door, and then you go in and half the people inside aren't wearing masks.
That's right. Yeah.
Flagrant, to me that is not acceptable. And but it's not, I don't feel like it's my position either to walk in there and start telling people in somebody else's establishment what to do. But in my parish, I sure as heck will say, masks required, otherwise that's your prerogative to exercise your choice to not come in the door. Anyway, sorry, my little rant.
No, I totally agree with you. You can only control what you're in charge of, whether it's your home, like you have a repair person coming inside your home, or your church, but you're right, when you're stepping into someone else's place of control, all you can do is what you can do to protect yourself. And when you wear a mask, you're protecting your neighbors. That's what you're doing.
And try to fall, and it's that cheesy thing, but what would Jesus do?
I know, exactly.
I mean, it does.
That's
I know Bill always says, what would Joyce do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm doing, like you say, what would Jesus do? Well, Jesus would want me to protect my neighbor. That's why I wear a mask.
So, but I think it's,
say, whose face do you see on the press briefing every Tuesday and Thursday? Dr. Shaw. Then when in Dr. Shaw's territory,
Very well
said.
said.
I like
that.
Dr. Fauci or
I
whoever.
think you're absolutely right. I mean, because, so obviously not conforming to vaccination requirements for children to go to school and not wearing masks is defying authority.
It is.
The executive orders that are in place in Maine require masks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can't socially distance, that is the law right
It
now.
is.
Now it's not enforced, but and in the same way, children to go to public school have to be vaccinated. To not have them vaccinated, you are now maybe you're just going to evade the law because you'll claim a religious or a personal exemption. But
Homeschool.
well, and homeschooling is very popular now. And
It
that's
is.
fine.
It is.
But
Yep.
but I think there are a lot of people who want their cake and eat it too, because
Right.
I've had these discussions and people say, but I pay taxes and so therefore my child should be able to go to the elementary school and they shouldn't have to be vaccinated.
I
Right.
disagree
And
with
I
that.
say, well, but should they, should you have to wear seatbelts? Should you have to do any of these other things that the
Right.
government instructs you to do?
Right.
Right.
And what happens when your child becomes sick and you take, because in some cases the person I'm talking to, the child is on main care. Okay, so actually they're not paying taxes, to be quite honest. It's a very interesting, I agree with you, get into a lot of discussion here. To me, though, I listen to the other person, and if their logic is loving,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, Seventh-day Adventists are loving their own community, right? They're trying to stay faithful to their own community. So there is some love there, okay? But so I don't know whether that's the level at which I would start to object. I would start to object when people are being tortured and killed. And
Yeah.
I mean, I can't support that. These higher level things. I mean, and I agree that the pandemic spreading is a form of disaster. But anyway, so I do think there are gradations, but I think you do have to listen and try to, I mean, my neighbor is a wonderful neighbor. And I have my yard signs in front of my house. And with one exception, he has completely opposite yard signs in front of his house. And we're very good neighbors. He respects us and we respect him. We always have, even though he is 180 degrees different from us on the political spectrum. And we went to his wedding. Okay.
Tom, I'm addressing the Latter-day Saints.
Seventh-day Adventist.
Seventh-day Adventist, well, okay, it's me. When women in childbirth in the 1800s were dying, they finally found washing your hands. The doctor to wash their hands before they went into a woman, and the infections ceased when they finally washed and they gloved their hands. They fought hard, doctors really did, because it was against their right to help somebody and to have to wear gloves and wash their hands and to wash the cloths and stuff like that. Then came the surgeries, and the doctors are standing around masked and gloved and gowned so they don't get any infection into the person that they're working on. What is the difference?
Exactly. Good point. Good example.
I mean, I don't want to die in the hospital because some idiot won't wash his hands and wear a mask. I don't want to die out in public.
Yeah, when you're grocery shopping.
Because some idiot is not wearing a mask. It's the same thing. It's a transmission of germs, and just
Right.
because they can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You can't see air either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't understand the concept. I understand they want to protect their group because they're all about their group. But I am about my group. My group is the world.
Right. What is
What is
God's, all of
The
God's
rest of us.
children,
We're
right?
all together. We're on this little swirling ball. But we're all together. We're all the same species.
So I'm on that note,
Okay.
I am going to ask us to turn to Micah 6:8. If you're able to find it, it
Matthew
is
Mark,
is one of the minor-ish prophets. Is before is like
After Jonah and before
That's
Nathan.
the
Yeah,
deep
you've
justice,
got
love, mercy, and love
Nahum.
humbling text. See?
Where is
yeah,
it?
it's after Jonah. So it's in the minor prophet section. So you have to go like after Jeremiah and Ezekiel, then you've Daniel, Amos
And what's the chapter and verse?
6:8. This is,
There it is. Oh my God, I found it.
look at that. See?
And boy, did Barbara get it right.
Which one?
Where's my
Chapter 6, verse 8. He has told you, O mortal, what is good.
Oh, I've got it underlined.
Lori, would you read it, please?
Verse 8.
6:8. Yep.
He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and if what doth Jehovah require of thee, but to do justly and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with thy God.
Yeah.
Ooh, I remember one thing I learned in Old Testament in seminary. One thing that I remember. It's that the word humbly in Hebrew, it doesn't mean what we think it means.
No.
It actually means walk seriously with a purpose, is a better interpretation.
All right. And Bill,
See the pink?
I see pink.
That's
Yes.
that verse. This is Joyce's study Bible.
Yes. So I would say that if we
Wow.
are to try to sum up what Jesus was also trying to teach, drawing upon the foundations of the prophets, is that when we are in doubt as to how to act or respond to a situation, I mean, Jesus sums it up pretty simple, you know, love your neighbors yourself, love God with everything you got. But that's so broad, like you can't even wrap your mind around it sometimes. But if you think about, I have to act with the justice that God would require, and to love, to be merciful, to give the benefit of the doubt if you're able, and to walk humbly, to not think your point of view is the only point of view. Because Jesus does mention being humble.
Yes.
You know, I mean, he rode a donkey in. That was his sign of power into Jerusalem, right? So I think that's a pretty good verse for us to think about this week.
But I like Barbara pointing out the one word, and then the other one that they point out
Humbly.
here is that kindness is actually hesed, which is
Steadfastness.
steadfastness.
Yeah.
And that goes to how you're walking.
Yeah.
Walking humbly. You're walking with purpose.
With purpose.
And it's saying here the steadfastness is really loyalty to the covenant, God's covenant.
Right.
Your covenant with God. And I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, we leave Bible study, we leave worship at church, and it's easy to fall away from our covenant with God, to do
Right.
things where we're not loving kindness and and seeking justice, but we're just getting by.
Right.
You know, that's the challenge. I think it's to be 24/7 Christian is impossible.
Yeah.
Only
That's why
Christ
we go to
did it.
sleep, so we get out, don't get into trouble. And I also like the seriousness and walking with purpose, because, you know, like in Luke with the sending of the disciples, and, you know, Luke 12, I think it is, or 11, 12, something like that, and just you walk, you know, don't greet anybody on the road. You're on God's mission. It's like,
Oh, that's, yeah.
you know, you walk.
Right.
Our purpose is God's mission. That's our purpose.
I have one little happy story to tell you at the end. And I
Okay.
know you're ready to go.